podcast idea is about doing a book reading podcast with my wife. Kind of was inspired by a couple of other podcasts, Sunday School Dropouts, and I Don't Even Know Net Television. Both really, really good book podcasts. Pretty stellar. If you haven't listened to them, you could listen to that instead of this. Or, if there aren't enough episodes of this, go listen to those. But I like reading, and I don't do it enough. And my wife loves reading and deserves to do it more. But she draws a lot because she cares about trying to deliver to the people. So I wanted to have a thing that would encourage us both to read some books that we hadn't read before, that we kind of were interested in. Mostly we're going to stick to classics for now. That doesn't mean we'll never go into a newer book. It just means for right now we have a bunch of books where we're like, oh, you know, I always wanted to read that. And maybe we'll move into something more modern. For now, sticking to some classics. Title of the podcast, Kraken the Spine, because my wife is a giant water beast that can break ships apart.
It's
and
true.
Books have spines.
And it's nice to have my tank moved closer to the microphone for this. I mean, it would have made more
don't get used to it, because it's a privilege, not a right.
I mean, it would have made more sense for you to just bring the microphone and everything over to my tank.
Well, that's okay. The phone that I'm recording this on is very heavy, and I decided I was going to move your tank first.
Drop it right into the tank.
As a little bit of a preface, today and the following couple of episodes, we're going to be reading John Milton's Paradise Lost, a classic epic poem in free verse about Satan and all that good stuff. John Milton wrote this, I think, after he was blind. I think he was blind by the time he was writing this. Don't worry, he was thrilled about it. He loved being blind.
Yeah, he always wanted to
He
be
thought
blind.
that all the great seers and prophets and great writers were blind, and so he kind of felt himself in good company, and that he even wrote a poem where he was like, I think God wanted me to be blind so that the only thing I could do was impart my ideas to others. I couldn't get another type of job, which I guess if that's what he believed, I don't know.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the different editions that we're reading?
Oh, yes, we should definitely address that. Okay, so, Paradise Lost, as you might imagine, is a pretty well-known classic book, so it has a lot of different printings. Most of them are not like a different translation or anything, for the most part. They exist as is, but have a ton of different types of notes, things like that, what it includes in terms of essays. So I decided, that I wanted to try and grab two editions that were very different so that my wife and I could be reading the same piece of work, but at the same time be taking away some interesting differences in what we were reading. So I got myself John Milton's Paradise Lost in plain English, which has won the Dumb Down Award. As it says on the front here, it is a simple line-by-line paraphrase of the complicated masterpiece, and includes the complete poem side by side with a plain English version, quote-unquote. By plain English version, I will definitely give you examples as we were reading, because there were a couple that really made me get a good chuckle in my little belly. But, yeah, so I tried to pick the one that was kind of the stupid one, and then my wife...
I have the Routledge 2nd edition, and on every single page, about half to 3/4 of each page is taken up by footnotes.
I figured when I was ordering her this, because I tried to look into what editions had the best footnotes, I figured that this one would have the most extensive footnotes and thus the best. I don't know. I mean, we all know that more is better in every case, right?
Well, I'm no stranger to footnotes. I really enjoy classics. In college, I ended up getting a minor in literature just because I really, really love reading old stuff. And so when she said there's more footnotes, I'm like, oh, the more the better. Because I was thinking of editors like Leonard Woolf, who bring a lot of really interesting information to the text and a little bit of their own love and kind of flavor occasionally. So yeah, I was looking forward to that, and I knew that it would mean, 2 to 3 times as much reading, but a lot of times footnotes can be very, very edifying. It's not the case this time. This is the first time I've read a book, and I did not know where to start it. Because sometimes I'll read the introduction, sometimes I won't, and because we're doing this for fun, and I didn't want to do like a full-on like research study, I was like, oh, I'll kind of skim the introduction, but I'd really want to focus on the Milton because, you know, we're having fun, and I've read Paradise Lost in the past, and I wanted to enjoy rereading it. I spent a good week reading through and being earnestly unable to determine where to begin. Because
you guys have to understand this. I asked her, like, hey, are you done with your reading yet? And she was like, I don't know if I started yet. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know if you started yet? And I was like, you just start. And she's like, there's a lot of introductions. And I'm like, oh, it's okay, skip the introductions. We don't need all of the background. You know, I did a little research beforehand. And then she was like, no, I can't find it. And I was like, well, it's just where the poem starts. Find where the poem starts. And then she's like, no. There's an introduction in free verse poem in the beginning of my book.
There's 22 pages worth of notes to the general editors, preface to the second edition of this printing, preface of the first edition, abbreviations, chronological table of Milton's life and chief publications. That's 22 pages before the book even starts. And then there is yet another introduction. There's a printing history. There's text. There's punctuation notes. There's theology notes, astronomy notes, time scheme notes, criticism, portraits and illustrations. And then the book Paradise Lost starts on page 49, you know. And this is 49, not including the 22 pages of general editor's notes initially.
So that's starting on, like, page 60 or 70 then, right?
And the book hasn't started yet, because when I flipped through, I was like, oh, there we go, Paradise Lost. There's all of this other stuff, and then it starts on page 49. No, because then there's introduction and printer's notes from various printings from, like, the 1800s. So all of those people want to make their own little notes and words and ideas on the text, which we have not lost either. And epigrams from other people, and then introductory poems and beginnings from Milton. Before we even get to Milton's, like, initial argument, which hasn't even started the book yet, and then finally we get to the final that actually starts the fucking poem of man's first disobedience. I finally found those lines, and I felt like I was coming home, because I'm like, oh god, yes, I know this. And, I mean, this is still, book one is the introduction to the rest of everything.
Right.
But
so,
at least it's good.
My wife struggled through that. And
I struggled to start the book.
And it's okay. We forgive her for this. This is, you know, her dalliances. We forgive them.
Oh, thank you.
All right, to give a little bit more primer, Paradise Lost, in case you are unaware, was published in 1667, so it's old. Milton himself, I'm not going to give, like, a huge amount of background on, but he was living in London most of his life. He left London at one point in time when they had one of their last big plague outbreaks, which gives you a little bit of a better idea of where this kinds of things takes place. London was financially powerful enough to kind of challenge the monarchy in a real way. What they wanted to have was a representative government. And that kind of happens when people get richer than the king, you know. It makes it so that they want to have ability to govern in their own favor, not just have the decisions of someone else. So Milton kind of had a lot of sympathy for that kind of rebelliousness, but he also saw that rebellion kind of fail. Like, they weren't actually able to get rid of the monarchy in England, and they had just gone through a war to do so in his lifetime. So this poem being kind of about rebellious but noble character trying to overthrow God and failing, it has a little bit of resonance, I think, with his own personal, or rather his country's dealings. I'm sure that there's a shitload of notes about that in your book.
Well, here's another thing for me to say about the footnotes of this book before I even get into the Milton. that the footnotes for this book are not so much like other footnotes I've read, which give you information there down at the bottom, but the footnotes act more as almost like links to other books entirely. Not just referencing that somebody else had something to say, but moreover, they seem to remind the reader that other people have said things. So it's not this nice little medium point that I would have enjoyed of a, edification, of learning more. There are assumptions that it's a reader of an even higher level, or that's an arrogant way to put it, but
it's a researcher. Like, I think that edition is probably useful to somebody who's already read several editions of Paradise Lost.
Yes.
And has done some scholarship upon it, which, there are some people out there. I mean, one of our professors in college was a scholar of Milton.
Oh, yeah. So this book, I'm not saying that it is dumb or useless or it's bad to have a book with footnotes like this, but it is absolutely a stumbling block for me to obtain additional knowledge. So it's something that I've learned pretty quickly, is that it's okay to not bite off more than you can chew, because sometimes a book might be scholarly, but just might not be written for you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make. I guess I'd also say, like, make it easier for me to be able to research which edition of a book to buy. I seriously did a lot of work. I actually went to our local library and looked at what edition they had. They had a lot of scholarly books because it was a college library at a Christian college. So they had a heck of a lot of the research that this is probably referencing. Yeah. And they had one edition that looked okay. It had a hilarious picture of God flipping a table on the front of it. I think I might include that somewhere in order for everyone to get to see it. Maybe just put that one up.
If that's in the public domain, that really should be our podcast logo for this first section.
I actually was going to maybe put it as the, I'll probably put up your logo for most of the episode, and I'll just put up the picture during this section. Like, that'll be, like, part of the section. I'll just have that picture.
What I wanted to say in regards to that, and I'm sorry I got off on a tangent about the footnotes, because it's about the footnotes, is that the editor of these footnotes, appears to be convinced that this is not being written in sympathy to Satan. Yeah, I know. Wait! Alright. They continually discuss how this is supposed to be an overblown farce of an epic poem, and how ridiculous it would be to portray Satan and the hordes of hell like this, and that there is no way Milton can be taking this seriously, and that the reader is supposed to be like, what? And kind of laughing through a bunch of it.
That's a crazy hypothesis.
It is not what I was taught in college.
It wasn't what I was taught in college, and nor is it really what I'm getting from the text as I read it. Obviously, when it comes to scholarly analysis of something, you have a lot of options in terms of what you say about it, and many things about it can be quote-unquote true. You don't really have a sureness. Obviously, it's good to in some ways defer to people who have studied something longer than you to learn some things, but that doesn't always mean they're going to be right.
Yeah, and I think that something else, and again, reading through all of the introductions, there was a lot there, and this is a deeper poem than either of us are going to be able to, we'll be going chapter by chapter, but still, it's going to be too much to cover everything.
Yeah.
It is a very old poem, and a very beloved poem, so there are a lot of perspectives, and I get the feeling that a few of the perspectives saying, oh, well, this is supposed to be satire, right, might be a little bit of how an introduction like this could survive 400 years. Because, and I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I listened to some of those footnotes, but they didn't really sway me. That just the idea of such a loving depiction of Satan yelling at God for being cruel could withstand the test of time in Western literature, there had to have been a lot of people apologizing for it and going, no,
Yes.
he's joking.
In a way, kind of the same way Beowulf as a poem got to survive basically
By getting edited and
getting edited and kind of adding a context of Christianity onto a poem that had no concept of Christianity written into it. As you may or may not know, old epic poem by the name of Beowulf was translated by a monk at one point in time, and one of the only reasons that such a piece of quote-unquote pagan literature might have survived as long as it has in, you know, a society of heavily Catholic Christian type of vibes is because they kind of added God into the poem. So the idea that people would maybe interpret this poem and try to apologize for it and keep it from being called blasphemy by trying to make it seem like, oh yes, the fact that it sympathizes with Satan is totally a joke, or it doesn't actually sympathize with Satan, or whatever they have to explain it away as. So there's a vested interest, I think, in some people to describe this poem as such. It is still a poem that is really beloved, I'd say, in Christian literary circles.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's something interesting, I think, to explore. So as we go, those are things to keep in mind, I guess I'd say. One of my notes that I wrote to myself is, like, as I've been reading it, I felt like it's using a religious story to frame, in many ways sympathetically, a rebellious force against society as is, which is always kind of a difficult sell, no matter what era you're living in. Being a violent, rebellious force, it can be really hard to win mainstream sympathy for. So I think a really interesting poem, and defers to something that people can't argue with in the way that they would argue with someone saying, I want to overthrow the king, or I want to kill the president. When you say, like, I'm going to tell you a story about how Satan tried to overthrow God. And they're like, well, that's incontrovertibly true. He did try to do that. And so you kind of are able to slip under the radar some of the things you might want to say about rebellion and about sympathy for the rebellious person that you couldn't necessarily say by talking about present day events. You could talk about history. You can defer to this deep cultural norm.
Oh yeah, and especially in the 1600s in British and Western circles, you couldn't talk about new ideas. That was very much a thing. It was like, no, new is bad, so if I want to have an idea and I want to argue for it, I need to find support for it in, you know, the classical tradition.
Right. Okay, so let's try and get started here. The start of the book, the first 20-ish lines, maybe 25 lines, is a standard of classical literature, which is, it starts off with an appeal to God and or appeal to the muses, which is something that Greeks and Romans would do. They'd start their poem by appealing to the muses to inspire them to write a good poem.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that anybody who has ever done any creative endeavor for long enough that it stops being fun all the time and starts being legitimate, you know, like work, or if you've ever had any anxiety about beginning a project, the desire to appeal to a goddess of creation and creativity and theater and music is like, oh man, yeah, give me that inspiration, help, please help.
And I think that the one line that struck me in that first 25 that kind of made me laugh and think, his sentences are very long, so I'm not actually going to read whole sentences necessarily when I do this, but he basically says, help me, I want to invoke your aid so that I don't just do this middle of the road. I want to try things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. And I'm like, imagine a time where it's actually true that you can be pretty sure that no one's ever tried to tell this story before. How wild is that? That's pretty wild.
Also, with the middle of the road, on line 14, when he says, invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeonian mount. I mean, he's not doing an invocation to a muse. He's doing an invocation to the Holy Spirit.
Oh, of course.
Oh yeah. But he gives a dig in there, which is kind of wild. That, like, with no middle flight, so like not even a mediocre, not even a normal flight, will go above the home of the muses.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's deliberately invoking God as better than the muses and saying, like, the Holy Spirit needs to fill me and inspire me to write this well.
and I mean, you know, a Christian poem, might as well.
Right.
But yeah, that seemed pretty crazy to me, and I loved the prayer aspect of it in line 22 and 23.
Mm-hmm.
What in me is dark, illume. What is low, raise and support. Like, just, you know, when my work's shitty, can you just make it better? Can you just fix it?
Oh my gosh, so, because I have my in plain English version, and that line has been translated, would you like to hear what it says?
I would love to hear what it says.
It says, "Enlighten me where I am ignorant, and strengthen my abilities so that I can correctly explain God's great purpose to men."
Yeah, to the height of this great argument, I may assert the eternal providence. Yeah, that's not a bad translation.
It's not the worst. There's a couple parts of it that are really funny. That one was
I am hyped for that. Don't you worry.
So those first lines, a classical invocation.
Yeah.
And then he starts to describe saying where he's kind of going with this. He wants to tell of Satan's initial fall and man's first disobedience.
And so classical tradition, if not completely textually accurate, the idea of Satan back when he was Lucifer up in heaven, seeing some things that God was doing wrong and rebelling and getting like a ton of other angels with him, and then God just kicks their ass and punts them straight out of heaven.
Yeah.
So just in case anybody is coming in completely fresh.
Completely fresh. Okay, yeah. I guess I do need to remember that. So he basically said, who seduced humans to this revolt where they tasted the fruit? It was the snake. It was Satan. And
oh yeah, and here he's getting ahead of himself. He's talking about the Garden of Eden, and don't worry, we're not there yet.
Yeah, we're starting off by him just mentioning like Satan was the one who did it. What about Satan's past? And
let's take it back.
Let's take it back a notch, even further back. And you know, he discusses how pride and vanity were kind of his reasons for failure. And by about, I guess I'd say, line 40, he's starting to really tell the story. Mm-hmm. He kind of glazes over what I would have thought would be the first part of the poem, which is the part where Satan, like, decides he's awesome enough to take on God and then gets a bunch of angels and, like, fights God. Like, all that's not in here.
No. We get some pretty sweet
description
of him, the almighty power, hurled headlong, flaming from the ethereal sky with hideous ruin and combustion down to bottomless perdition, there to dwell in adamantine chains and penal fire. I mean, this is a metal song waiting to happen.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that there are metal songs.
There's got to be like Christopher Lee reading of this accompanied.
Yeah, totally. So he starts off with Satan and his sympathetic angel soldiers being literally just thrown into hell. And it goes a long way to talk about where Satan's kind of like laying on the ground, and it says, "For now, the thought both of lost happiness and lasting pain torments him." That's on 55 and 56.
Ah, yes. Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to do a lot of gushing about the words in a lot of this because he's taken the time to make everything really pretty and melodramatic. And if you're up to take things nice and slowly and have somebody paint a picture for you with words, then Paradise Lost will be your jam. But yeah, that it's just everybody just lying in the muck and the water. And it's like 9 days.
Yeah, 9 days they lay on the ground in the fiery water.
Yeah. And they're just like crying until they can't cry anymore. Everybody who's been depressed kind of knows that feeling. There's nothing to do.
That feel when God casts you out of heaven and you lay on the floor for 9 days.
And so I marked a dungeon line 61. Mm-hmm. A dungeon horrible on all sides round, as once great furnace flamed, yet from those flames no light, but rather darkness visible, served only to discover sights of woe.
It's like, I let you see here just so you can see how shit it is.
Exactly! Like, the only place where there's light is where it is worse to see things than to not see things. And so right there in the margin I wrote, sucks.
Yeah. I wrote similar types of notes in many places.
And then line 66, or 65, 66, where peace and rest can never dwell, hope never comes that comes to all. And I wrote, oh man, that is way worse. Because that idea that, like, this isn't a place that's bereft of hope, but hope never comes that comes to all. So the moment one of them might start to think, I think maybe I can get through this, people aren't there to support them.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever one of them gets hope, there's not enough of them. There's always somebody to drag them back down. It's very, very Sartre view of hell in a way.
Mm-hmm.
That's so much worse. That, like, when you are upset and all of your friends are upset, at least you can commiserate and be mad together.
Mm-hmm.
But the only thing that's worse than everybody being upset and hurting together is everybody around you upset and hurting, and you're ready to try to heal.
Yeah. I mean, that's really rough. And honestly, the way I read that line, I read it as, like, hope never comes that comes to all, kind of because of the way they had, the line is framed.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that what it meant was they'll never die. They're immortal. So the hope that your suffering can end is, I think, that kind of one of those last, like, it's not a good type of hope.
Oh, you're right, because he does say, but torture without end still urges. So I think that's definitely valid.
Yeah, so what I imagined was just the way that, like, even somebody who is suffering the worst living nightmare that they can live knows that at some point in time they will die and that suffering will end. At least in theory.
Yes.
And these angels are all immortal. They know that there is no end to what they will experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. He goes out of his way to really make this sound pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
It goes on for a while, and I love it.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a description talking about how it's very different from heaven, that everything is made of fire. Basically, the ground is fire, there's lava, there's just fire everywhere.
Yeah, Milton really wants to drill it into you that, like, they fought, but now that they're down here, like, they weren't prepared for this. I don't know if he says if it was possible for them to have comprehended that a place like this could exist, that they've been in heaven for their entire existences, and now it's gone, and they had no frame of reference for just how terrible a place could exist, and that now they have to stay here forever.
So, Satan, at about line 80 to 84 here, he kind of turns a little bit in the mud, and it's kind of fire mud. I mean, technically, everything is fire. Just if I say a ground type term, imagine it's on fire, because that's what it's all about in hell. So he turns to his top general, Beelzebub, and he's like, oh my God, is that really you? You used to shine more brightly than anyone. The most beautiful, like, and now you look like shit, dude. Yeah, so he basically kind of starts right here to say, like, wow, you know, it's good to have you next to me. In a certain sense, he's like, we were joined once in glory, and now we're joined in misery and ruin. So
a couple lines after that, when he's talking about God, and he's like, so much the stronger proved he with his thunder. Until then, who knew the force of those dire arms? Like, you can almost feel like a chill running up his spine when he says that.
Yeah.
That, you know, and he spends a lot of time talking throughout this of, like, my army was so big and so powerful. This doesn't make sense. Like, you know, and that's the pride in there that he very much was super convinced that these mighty, terrifying legions, and they were super powerful and everything, but that they would be enough. And he's like, I couldn't imagine that there was anything stronger than that. But oh no.
Oh my God. And he does really build up his pride in this scene, which is great. He kind of goes like, he does say, like, I couldn't have imagined how incredible his power was. And from there he says, like, all is not lost. The inconquerable will and study of revenge, immortal hate, courage never to submit or yield. And he says, that glory never shall his wrath or might extort from me. So he basically says, no matter what God does to me, he'll never make me kneel. And that is the one power that Satan realizes that he still has. It's kind of what's able to kind of bolster him in this moment is he realizes that no matter how much he's suffered and how much God has defeated him and his armies, that he still owns his will and his own personal, like, pride and might.
And that's the really compelling thing about this in book one, how Milton turns Satan's classical flaw and what is always treated as the worst of the 7 deadly sins into such a shining, beautiful virtue of, yes, he fought because of his pride. Yes, he got all of his friends and all of the people who loved and trusted him the most kicked into literal fire mud when they were used to gleaming palaces and happiness pretty much like all the time, it seems. But that pride that fucked up everything for him and everybody that he cared about, it's what also won't let things be completely hell. It won't let him give up, and it won't let them fall in a way.
Yeah.
And you can't read this and not feel stirred up by that. That, like, even if it's, you know, this fucking rage against God, you gotta go, like, man, that is a leader that everybody wants to be behind.
Oh yeah, here I'm gonna read you the plain English version of this, which I think was good and strong also. He says, so what if we lost some ground? He'll never be able to take away my free will, my revenge, my hate, or my courage to never give up. And if I still have that, what did he win? Am I supposed to kneel and beg for mercy from him, who I just gave some serious worry about the safety of his empire? It would be a worse shame than the defeat we just had to show him that I'm afraid of him now and to show him that he's cowed me.
Oh, while he's saying that, and when he goes, since by the strength of gods and this imperial substance cannot fail, and my footnotes say in here that even like the doubting editors who think that we're not supposed to be trusting Satan and his words and that these are like lots of lies and stuff, they even think that that is potentially truthful, that Milton thought God unable to annihilate anything. He followed Aristotle in, quote, subjecting God's omnipotence to the principle of non-contradiction. So the idea behind this is Satan goes, well, he can't kill us. You know, no matter what he can try to do to us, like, this is pretty much the worst that he's got, guys. He can't murder us.
Yeah, I mean, that they can't really die. That's something that obviously is going to be used in a way to torture them. But that Satan would try to turn it around to be like,
yes,
you know, we can't be killed.
Yeah, and basically, we can't be killed, and you know what that means? That means we are a boulder so big God cannot move us. Which, you know, if you're getting your gumption back up, it's a pretty awesome thing to be able to think about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely basically just says, we may, with more successful hope resolve, to wage by force or guile eternal war, irreconcilable to our grand foe, who now triumphs, and the excess of joy soul reigning holds in the tyranny of heaven. So, he's saying, like, God's gloating now, but, we can fight him forever.
Yeah.
Which is a cool thing to say while you're laying in fire mud.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, Milton's trying to show the two sides of it, like, so spake the apostate angel, though in pain, vaunting aloud, but racked with deep despair.
Yeah,
he is crowing, but he is dying inside.
Right. He's like, I'm amazing. God. That's like half of this first book one. It's just Satan going like, isn't this the best?
Yeah.
It's good.
It's good.
Alright, then Beelzebub says back to him, O prince, chief
of you led so many seraphim to battle, basically kind of saying our minds and spirits are indestructible.
Yeah, he kind of goes over what happened, but he's trying to do some emotional labor there for Satan.
Yeah. For the mind and spirit remains invincible, and vigor soon returns. Though all our glory extinct and happy state, here swallowed up in endless misery. So he basically says, we'll never be happy again, but we will regain our ability to stand and move around and do some stuff. And then he kind of posits, like, but what if he, our conqueror, who I am now of force to believe almighty, since no less than such could have overpowered a force such as theirs, have left us this, our spirit and strength entire, strongly to suffer and support our pains, so that we may suffice his vengeful ire, or do him mightier service as his thralls by right of war. Basically, overall, this whole thing, he's saying, like,
what if our rebellion was totally his plan, though, man?
Yeah, the rebellion that we're about to even try, like, to do against him. What if he's leaving us alive to have us, A, suffer, and then B, do his bidding?
Yeah. What if the whole plan was to get us down here so that this empty place could be fixed up and built up to do whatever the heck he wants?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that one marked down, too. And because it leads straight into Satan just doubling down in the worst way.
It's the best, actually. This is totally the best passage of the whole thing.
But yeah, he's like, I don't want to do this whole thing.
I wish we could too. It's like so good.
But he goes like, to be weak is miserable, but of this be sure, to do aught good never will be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight.
As being contrary to his high will, whom we resist.
Yes. If then his providence out of our evil seek to bring forth good, our labor must be to pervert that end, and out of good still to find means of evil. So,
which oft times may succeed, so as perhaps that we shall grieve him.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, we can't hurt him in any way, other than maybe we can make him sad.
And I mean, Satan, come on! What did you rebel for? He's so caught up in the terrifying notion that God is omnipotent that he wants to do something, anything, to assert his own will against a God's almighty power. And he's like, well, if God's supposed to be good, then we just have to do everything awful in the hopes that we can make something not go according to his plan. Or if it is part of his plan, just make it so shitty that he chokes on it. And come on. Like, by this point, you just, I know he's already been thrown into hell, but you want to give him a rap on the head and go like, you must have had some nobler aspirations somewhere, man. It doesn't have to be about God. Don't go back up there. Just do what you want on your own terms. Don't let your entire sense of self and goals in eternity be completely focused on pissing one guy off. Like,
I think that's part of the, like, nature of him not being able to learn from his mistakes.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, like, this is clearly Milton doing his best to go like, I wonder what Satan is actually like.
Yeah, like, what sort of person would fight a person for eternity?
And I mean, this is one of the reasons that it hurts so much to read is because it's very believable. I mean, I think we've all known somebody who was so pissed at somebody else that they kept on hurting themselves and making their own situation worse in order to just spite somebody.
Yeah, it's like cut your own nose to spite your face sort of thing. And, of course, we have one of the very inspiring lines after you've suffered a deep defeat at the hands of someone more powerful than you, and reassembling our afflicted powers, consult how we may henceforth most defend our enemy, how our own losses repair, how overcome this dire calamity, and what reinforcement we may gain from hope, if not what resolution from despair.
Oh yeah, that one is oft quoted. It's so good.
It's like after you've been so harmed to say like, we gotta regroup and see if we can find any rest, see if we can find any hope, and if we can't find hope, at least let us try to find resolution from the despair we feel.
Yeah. If everything's bad, grit your teeth and sink your heels in and just let it be bad and let that fuel you. And I think that's what he's gonna spend a few thousand more years doing.
Yeah. I have a hunch. I believe in this part we kind of read, it's like in 190, maybe it's more like 200. It's from like 194 to like 210. We get a description of him laying prone, and he's kind of gigantic and chained down, as far as I can tell. He's chained on the burning lake. And there's something implied in the line here where I just, in like 212, he says he might have never, like, lifted his head at all if not for having permission from God to do so. Mm. And at least in Milton's estimation, then, he's saying God wills this.
Yeah, I have marked down for this entire section just summarized as Satan stands up.
Yeah, it's very long, and
I mean, it's really lovely imagery, because Milton is going to great lengths to compare him to like a Leviathan and talk about just that, like, Satan isn't this dude sitting in the water. He is a huge creature, and just the act of this giant man beast getting up out of the water, pulling off his chains, spreading his wings in, wide and taking off into the air, that it is this blockbuster special effect.
Yeah. But yeah, at least in the way Milton is estimating it, he has a line in here to basically say, all this malice served but to bring forth infinite goodness, grace, and mercy shown on man.
Yeah.
So he's saying, like, this was deliberate. Satan is able to move and be, at least in what the theology Milton is presenting, that he's allowed to move and be because it brings glory to God to have evil for man, to A, overcome, or B, have God forgive them of.
Because bad things happen for a
reason. Good. Yes, this is good theology. We are very good.
Well, I mean, whether we like it or agree with it doesn't matter. We do have solid contextual.
We're interpreting the text to say what it says. It's bad. But at least in terms of what Milton's theology seems to be, he's saying that that while Satan and his angels do not know if they are down here on purpose to make God happy, or if this is just like punishment and then God didn't really have a plan, he seems to imply that, yes, there's a plan. There's a plan that he's getting out of this lake at all to serve God, even if he doesn't want to and doesn't think he is.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, he gets out of the water. He spreads his wings. My wife described it quite nicely. Although, note from my simplified version, he then spread his wings and flew up into the polluted air and landed on dry land, if you could call it land, since it was hot as fire.
Oh my god, yes! No, that's perfect! That's it. The if you could call it land, yes, that's absolutely what's going on. That, like, every time, and I feel this way when I'm trying to write horror, that, like, every single time you want to have a description for something that's supposed to be otherworldly and uncomfortable and kind of beyond human ken, you're always like, noun, but if that noun were both not noun and bad. Like, Milton's doing that just all over the place. It's kind of like muddy water, but it's on fire, like, all the way through.
And I also thought it was a kind of a cute detail to say, like, Satan gets out of the water and Beelzebub follows him. It says, him followed by his next mate, both glorying to have escaped the Stygian flood as gods by their own recovered strength and not by the sufferance of supernal power. So they're basically saying, like, they're just proud that they got out without God's help. I mean, so they think, but they got out by, like, without having to give each other a hand. They were like, I was strong enough after 9 days laying in the fire mud to get up and fly just on my own super awesome power.
I got up and I brushed my teeth and I made a meal. Dad, looks like that's the tray Dad puts food on, but I don't think he had anything to do with it.
No, I just like that this is totally the description of, like, when you wake up, like, an hour earlier than usual, and you have to get up to go do something, and you're like, I spread my wings and got onto the fiery water on my own power.
Oh, wow. What a great alarm that would be. Just like Satan, like, come, my forces. We've got this.
Offend thy God! Get out of the fiery water! Alright, so, let's see.
He addresses his armies.
Yes, basically he gets up and, like, starts to try to gather people. His speech is very inspiring, but at the same time just, like, as inspiring as you can be when you're in this sort of position. It's farewell happy fields where joy ever dwells. Hail horrors, hail the infernal world, and thou profoundest hell. Receive thy new possessor, a one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. So he's setting himself in this resolve we kind of said earlier, where he's like, goodbye, every good thing I've ever known, and hello, shitty hole that I rule now, coolest me.
Yeah, and I mean, he enters dialogue with, some other proverbs when he goes, the mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven, what matter where, if I be still the same.
I love that line.
But there's, like, Psalms goes, I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God. And Homer says, better a living shepherd than king of the dead. Plutarch in Life of Julius Caesar goes, I would rather be first here than second in Rome. So, I mean, and there's a lot of,
Well, he says better to reign in hell than serve in heaven.
Well, yes, he's going against conventional wisdom. The conventional wisdom goes, it is better to be comfortably serving a noble ruler than ruling by your own 2 feet in a harsh or scary environment. And Satan is just straight up going, no, fuck that. I stand on my own 2 feet, I do my own thing, and I don't care how good heaven is, I'd rather be down here now that I'm free.
Yeah, he goes against that idea that... honestly, again, a lot of this poem is about rebelliousness against, like, the powers that be. It's very much, and, you mentioning Rome there, it's just like, that kind of proverb typically exists to say, stay in your place.
Yeah.
And regardless of if you could have somewhat more power in another place, that, you might as well be in this place where you're comfy and safe and doing what the right thing, when the right thing means serving the person above you.
Yeah, that's the thing, that which side of that proverb you end up on matters on the quality and consistency of the pancakes. I mean, ruler.
Yeah. Oh, God, I want to watch that movie now. The quality of the life being lived, and of course, the quality of the pancakes.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, so...
Beelzebub basically says, when your soldiers hear your voice, they'll come around because they're laying still after falling so far, and it'll revive their strength if they hear you.
Yeah, and it does.
Yeah, basically, he describes how big some of these guys are, and kind of Satan as a leader here says his spear's, like, bigger than the mast of a ship.
Oh, I have a note about that, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, like, weapons as ship masts were a very common classical simile or metaphor. And it lists a bunch that I'm not going to list. But the way that Milton's turning it around here is that Satan has this epic spear that is like a mast. But then he says, the tallest pine hewn on the Norwegian hills to be the mast of some great admiral were but a wand he walked with to support uneasy steps. So this is not only an awesome weapon, not only a legendary and huge weapon, but because of his situation right now, it's just a walking stick, and he's leaning on it. That, like, even though he's doing all of these massive, huge things, and he unfurled his wings and he flew out of there, he's not doing great. He's giving this rousing speech, but he's not doing great.
Yeah. The torrid climb smote on him sore besides, vaulted with fire. So just to say, like, even if he got out of the fiery water, he's just being burned by the air and the ground.
Yeah. It goes back and forth between Satan saying something amazing, and then the atmosphere reminding us, this does suck, though.
It's so bad.
And I mean, that's where I think it's easy to make arguments on both sides of whether Satan is supposed to be kind of awesome for enduring all this and continuing to say this, or whether his pride is made the more atrocious that he's continuing to go, I'm fine. And yeah, I mean, there's both readings, you know?
And a lot of the, like, later verses here kind of describe this, but in 301, it says, his legions, angel forms, who lay in transit thick as autumnal leaves. And he describes some more, but basically to say, like, he has a shitload of angels with him. There's many verses after this just talking about that they, like, choke the air with how many there are, or that there are just thousands and thousands of them, thinking about leaves on the ground in fall.
Yeah, there's a whole page of footnotes about that, basically reminding the reader that hosts and armies were very frequently compared to leaves, especially when defeated, like leaves on the ground, or pine needles on the ground. It doesn't say anything in here, but I do know that in Japanese literature, there's also the discussion of petals on the ground as well. So, tree bits.
He calls to them, 3:16, the flower of heaven once yours now lost. If such astonishment as this can seize eternal spirits, or have you chosen this place, after the total of battle, to repose your wearied virtue? For ease you find to slumber here, as in the vales of hell. So what he's saying, basically, is he literally just got up, like, 5 seconds ago. And he looks at everybody else laying in the fiery water, and goes like, hey, lazy shits! Is this just where you love sleeping?
Have a little nap. You're gonna slumber here as in the vales of heaven.
Isn't it nice? So comfy? You just lay here?
So nice.
It's kind of a mocking them encouragingly is what I wrote.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I mean, he goes after that, or in this abject posture have ye sworn to adore the conqueror. So he's like, oh, so you guys lying down in prayer now? And I mean,
you love God laying in the lake?
Boom! They get up!
Yeah, they all get up. Or awake, arise, or be forever fallen.
Yes! So, I have that one marked too. So again, the best alarm clock ever.
Awake, arise, or be forever fallen.
I want when you come in and I'm still sleeping in mornings, I want you to just turn on the lights and hit me with that.
You'll just go, I'll be forever fallen, and then go back to sleep.
I am not a Heavenly Host member.
Heavenly Host Club, coming soon to you. Alright. Let's see.
Kiss, fall from grace.
No, God, no. Oh, and he also kind of threatens them like, hey guys, maybe if you lay down here, God will throw some more thunderbolts at you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that one. That
would crack me the fuck up.
That one actually scared me a little bit. Like,
maybe he'll permanently tie you down here by just throwing thunder at you forever.
Like the other stuff, I was like, oh man, wow, he's making good points. And then he's like, you know what, maybe the battle's not over. Maybe there's more infantry coming or like some firebolts. And it's like, oh shit, it could still be it is a war, isn't it? Like,
yeah, they're like, oh, we gotta get up. And so, my simplified version describes this next line in 331 through 335 to say, his words shamed them. They were like watchmen caught sleeping at their post.
Yep.
They rose up quickly and flew out of the lake, although they were in pain, and they spread out like a swarm of locusts that plagued Egypt.
Yeah.
So, basically, we just want to know that there's a lot in the next couple of pages that will describe how many of them there were.
Yeah.
He describes their massive numbers many, many times. in, like, line 358, he says that there were a lot of dignitaries and kind of like there were important angels in his multitude, as well as lower ones, lesser ones, I guess. It says that when they come to Earth at some point in time, they gain names, but a lot of these guys don't have names that we recognize or know yet. And as we go, we'll have more that will get named for various different characters throughout history.
Oh yeah, and I mean, they're noting that, like, they've had their names erased. They've had everything that they used to be taken from them, and that whatever identities and powers and everything they had as members of heaven, they don't get to have that anymore. That, like, by falling, you know, they don't just lose, like, the comfort and the cushy place up in heaven, but their identities are stripped from them. And, you know, for, like, humans, we could be like, man, I used to be somebody. And they're like, no, you don't get that. None of them get that. They don't get to be somebody. They don't get to have anything until humans give them a new name.
So in 392, they have Moloch. I believe that's a Sumerian god, but he mentioned in the Old Testament a couple of times the very proactive / kind of more important demons are idols from the Old Testament, things like that, like false idols. It says that children are going to get sacrificed to him. Let's see.
Moloch is the,
Moloch, Chemos, sorry.
Yeah, Moloch is talked about a lot in the Old Testament as a god whose worshippers did sacrifice human children. I have no idea if that's a thing that actually happened or was just bad press.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when it comes to the Old Testament, it's definitely one of those things where, this is true of most history, where if it's somebody that you don't like and you don't want your followers to fall in with, you might decide to describe them in terms that are a little bit worse than they are actually in real life. So, we couldn't tell you, we are not ancient civilization scholars. But yeah, so it talks about Moloch a little bit. I found interesting at line 423, they basically say, for spirits when they please can either sex assume, or both, so soft and uncompounded by their essence pure, nor tied or manacled with joint or limb, nor founded on the brittle strength of bones, like cumbrous flesh, but in what shape they choose, dilated or condensed, bright or obscure, can execute for their airy purposes, and works of love and or enmity fulfill. So they're basically saying that all these angels are agender shape-shifting beings.
Yeah, the footnotes here described it as Milton's spirits are free of sexism.
That's hilarious.
And I'm like,
what a dumbass.
I'm like, what? I mean, I guess?
They're beyond the gender binary.
Yeah, it's like, you guys can, other people can joke about all of these other terms, but when you finally need a term like that and all you have is Milton's spirits are free of sexism to discuss.
That's bullshit.
Oh, yeah. It's super bullshit, and it's like...
Yeah, they basically are able to assume whatever form and whatever type they like. I mean, he even goes out of his way to say either or both, like, to basically say, like, kind of, it doesn't even have to be one or the other, it can be many things. So, yeah, these are continual descriptions. Then there was Astoreth, who was worshipped in Solomon's evil temple as the Queen of Heaven. Yeah, okay, that's at 438. I think a Phoenician god then. Again, these are all probably just going to be what would have been referred to as quote-unquote pagan gods.
Yeah.
Basically, any of the demons that he gives name to, he chooses names of gods from other religions, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, it wouldn't be too hard to, if you took the Bible as fact and, you know, classical readings of the stories as fact, to go, like, well, where the fuck did these other gods come from? Oh, maybe they were really powerful angels, and then it would make sense that he could kick their ass, you know?
Yeah, oh my god. Can I just laugh a lot about 446 through 455 is talking about, my notes say Adonis, but in the poem it says Thalmus. I don't know. The point is, basically this passage describes Thalmus as being able to bleed purple his native rock ran purple to the sea, supposed with blood, and whose wanton passions in the sacred porch Ezekiel saw. It's kind of describing, like, he bleeds purple and makes women horny? I'm not actually sure what this is supposed to be.
Okay.
Infected daughters of scions, with heat?
Okay. Alright, so, first off, they're discussing the River Adonis.
Okay.
And the River Adonis would seasonally flood.
Oh, so it would get red clay in it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Jesus. What the fuck? Glad your notes said something of
Yes.
actual interest. Like, because my notes say, next was Adonis. Syrian women sang sad love songs about how he would bleed a river of blood every year. And that would make all the Jewish women become sexually aroused. And I'm like, what? Do those two things have to do with each other?
That is some buck wild notes you got there.
I mean, I picked these two versions specifically because I think it'll give us a lot of laughs. Thank you for some actual useful information. Would have appreciated my footnotes saying, like, hey, this river floods, and it would get up some extra dirt in it, and that would make it look bloody or muddy.
Yeah, like the weeping was part of the festival, as far as these notes seem to be saying.
Oh, actually, that's a really cool festival. If, like, your river yearly floods and takes on some extra mud and turns a different color, you go to the river and then kind of have a cool festival. That sounds rockin'.
Yeah. I guess it would happen, or maybe they didn't cry, but the flooding would actually happen at, like, the end of the growing season. So it would be symbolic of their god dying every year because...
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Oh, yeah, I love that. We gotta go to the Blood River Festival some year.
If it's still going on.
Hey, you know what? We can just start it back up ourselves if we gotta. There was next a sea monster, Dagon. And this description is Dagon, his name, sea monster, upward man, and downward fish. Which I loved so much as a description of a guy who was half man, half fish. Upward man, downward fish. Oh, Lord. That's good shit. Yeah, okay, that's the good shit.
Yeah.
Alright, Rimmon, my shorthand notes here, would be rejected by a poor leper, but a stupid king would build an altar to it. So basically, this whole section is, listing off gods. Like, then it goes to future gods of Egypt, like Osiris, Isis, and others who took the shape of beasts. So, it's saying, not only do we have the fact that angels can transform into anything, it's basically describing some of the other things they could look like to look like other religions' gods, basically. And I mean, it kind of works in the framework of saying, like, oh yes, all other gods are leading you astray, only one god actually is God. And all these other ones, yes, they're powerful, and yes, they seem really cool and they have all these powers, but they're just the ones that God thought wasn't worthy to be in heaven. So, you should just be, like, worshipping the good God, the one that everybody liked. Not even Israel would escape the infection of these, like, wandering gods in disguised brutish forms, because they worshipped a gold idol, and I'm like, oh yeah, just that one time. Yeah, they didn't have any other dalliances or problems. I mean, it's not like half of the Old Testament is them going like, guys, stop worshipping Moloch, please.
Well, Moloch's making a huge comeback. He's the most worshipped in 21st century America, right?
Oh yeah.
Heyo. Belial came last.
Yeah.
Than whom a spirit more lewd fell not from heaven, or more gross to love. Vice for itself.
Oh my god, my short version of that, Belial came last, the lowest spirit of all. He loved sin for its own sake.
I loved line 491 and was very sad when it continued on. It's just...
It's more gross to love.
He's the lewdest spirit and the grossest to love.
He's utterly disgusting to love. Okay, so anyway.
To him no temple stood or altar smoked.
Get smoked.
Yet who more oft than he in temples and at altars when the priest turns atheist?
Yeah, he's just like, Belial's the dude who makes your priest fuck.
That's not what it's saying, but that's what it says in my heart.
It's totally what it says. Don't be silly.
But yeah, basically saying that, like,
he would influence people kind of on the DL.
Well, yeah, that, like, while everybody else is, like, at least tending towards some form of organization, even if it be evil, he can't even manage an organization, so all he can do is atheists. That's the tone that I got from it.
Yeah, okay, so then they basically list a bunch of Greco-Roman gods then, too. He says Titan, Saturn, Zeus, all the Greek gods of Mount Olympus.
Yeah.
They spread through Italy and even Great Britain. Yeah, so basically listing off all the gods still. And there's Azazel. His standard is 533. His mighty standard, that proud honor claimed Azazel as his right, a cherub tall, who forthwith from his glittering staff unfurled the imperial ensign. So basically, Satan has a cool flag.
Yep.
That Azazel at his right-hand side unfurls next to him. And I'm like, what is Satan's radical flag? That is the most pressing question to me, is I must know what Satan's radical flag looks like. It's shown like a meteor streaming to the wind, with gems and gold luster, rich and blazoned, seraphic arms and trophies, all the while sonorous metal, blowing martial sounds, at which the universal host upset, a shout that tore hell's concave, and beyond frightened the reign of chaos and old night. So they're basically like, they really raised some hell down there.
Well, I mean, he's going to call this place, by its name, Pandemonium, or place, like, of all demons. And, from hence we can see how the word gets its modern feeling that, God, these guys are loud while they do everything for the rest of the chapter.
Well, no, not only that, but first they the reason that this part was, they were, like, playing trumpets.
Oh, it's a rallying cry.
Yeah, and screaming until even the darkness beyond hell could hear them.
Yeah. Chaos is like, I mean, I like things being wild, but could you tone it down a bit?
Oh, also in 545, it says 10,000 banners rise into the air with Orient colors. So I guess Orient colors, is that red, you think? So
No, it means brilliant or resplendent.
Oh,
rising.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that the Orient colors are beautiful colors. It just means we in the European sect can't make beautiful colors. Let's see. I don't know. This is making a shitload of noise.
Oh yeah.
For a while here. It actually says like that they make a lot of noise to it was deliberate valor breathed, firm and unmoved, with dread of death, to flight or foul retreat, nor wanting power to mitigate and assuage with solemn touches troubled thoughts, and chase anguish and doubt and fear and sorrow and pain from mortal or immortal minds. So basically saying, like, they're screaming just to make all the fear and doubt go away. Like, they're not just screaming. They have flutes, they have trumpets, they have banners and spears, and they're smashing their spears and helmets together, shields and everything. So they're trying to make a lot of noise to distract themselves from realizing how awful everything is.
Yep. They talk about how it's better than all these other
just talk
epic
about
hordes and hosts
so
from
many,
other armies.
Pretty rudely saying, every army before or since has been smaller, baptized or infidel. And I'm like, rude! So, yeah, there's a bunch of that.
So yeah, spent a lot of time bulking that all up. And then when we get to 588, yet observed their dread commander, he above the rest, in shape and gesture proudly eminent, stood like a tower. His form had not yet lost all her original brightness, nor appeared less than archangel ruined, and the excess of glory obscured. As when the sun, new risen, looks through the horizontal misty air shorn of his beams, or from behind the moon in dim eclipse disastrous twilight sheds on half the nations. There's a lot of just, like, really, really beautiful purple prose and lip service to going over and over how magnificent and big everything is.
I think that the next couple lines really interested me, too. Above them all the archangel, but his face deep scars of thunder had entrenched, and care sat upon his faded cheek, of dauntless courage and considerate pride, waiting revenge, cruel his eye, but cast the sign of remorse and passion to behold, the fellows of his crime, the followers, rather, far other once beheld in bliss, condemned, and forever now to have their lot in pain, millions of spirits, for his fault immersed of heaven, and from the eternal splendors flung, their glory withered. For his revolt, yet faithful how they stood, their glory withered. So he's basically saying that Satan has a really troubled, like, he's been, like, not just crushed by this, like, physically, but emotionally seeing this horde of people that he knows, millions of people are here because of him. Like, millions of angels are suffering this fate on his behalf. And he feels, I think, some remorse that he wants to take revenge, but it's not just for himself, but it also is revenge because he feels guilty for damning them.
Yeah, and so I had something to mark here and then something to discuss a little bit on this. So everybody just gathers around him. They're, like, so close, like, their wings are touching, and they're all, like, huddled up together, this huge mass around him. And half enclose him round with all his peers. Attention held them mute. Thrice he essayed, and thrice, in spite of scorn, tears such as angels weep burst forth. And the text down here, it cannot make up its mind in the footnotes whether those are real tears or fake tears.
Yeah, I really loved these lines too. I had these underlined, that 3 times he tries to speak, and his words are, like, interwoven with sighs as he tries. He's crying too much to speak at first. He like, is, when you're so upset that you can barely get words out of your mouth, is the way that this sounds to me.
Oh, yeah. And in spite of scorn, like, his... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, in my shorthand version, it says, he cried a little and was annoyed with himself for it. And I think that's what they're interpreting as the scorn.
Oh, yeah. But that's part of it. But that everything he's been doing has been fueled by his rage. His pride and his rage.
Good old Prage.
Good old Prage. Everything he's been doing has been fueled by his pride and his rage. And for this moment, at the very least, looking around at how much he has hurt everybody, even that pride that got him out of the chains and out of the muck and rallied everybody to him, his pride can barely overcome the guilt that he feels at hurting his friends.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most beautiful lines in the whole thing. Like,
oh.
I definitely underlined it on purpose there to say, like, it gets you a little emotional.
I didn't tear up, no.
I mean, it does, it's beautiful imagery because you can really imagine when someone is so upset that they can barely speak, but knowing that they have to. You know, when you've seen somebody, like a public speaker or something, like, you know, when somebody wins an election or, you know, something like that, or, you know, anything of that kind of nature where they didn't think they'd see this day and whatever, or alternately something horrible's happened as this is, and they're trying to still be a good leader, but at the same time know how much they feel pain.
Yeah. So then he finally does get himself under control enough to start another speech, and this one, he kind of used the rod to get them all up.
Yeah,
but now it's time for the carrot.
Yeah.
And I'd really love to read this whole thing out loud, but
it's really long.
It's like 50 lines, so we're not going to.
Yeah, but he basically addresses them all, and he says, like, we were glorious, and the only person that could have beaten us was God. You know, like, we were strong, we were great, your fight had glory.
We get another really great proverbial tidbit on line 643. At length from us may find, who overcomes by force hath overcome but half his foe.
Yes.
And,
oh my God, that's good shit.
And I mean, it ties right back into his whole big thing of, you can beat down my body, but my will is still here. And him telling them that, like, nobody but God could have beat you. And babies, he only beat us halfway.
Yeah, I have let him find out that winning by force is only half a victory. We might find new worlds to conquer.
Yeah. Space may produce new worlds. And he's like, we'll find new places.
He's like, God doesn't own everything! Which is a real hoot. But yeah, this is just him trying to rally these guys to say, like, there's hope, let's explore. We haven't really looked at what we have here yet. For this infernal pit shall never hold celestial spirits in bondage, nor the abyss long under darkness cover. Yeah, basically, he's like, we can never submit, war forever.
Yeah.
All of the angels draw their swords.
They're all on fire.
I mean, just like the ground and the sky and the air, and their swords are also on fire.
Yeah, but like this, the sudden blaze far round illumined hell.
Yeah, so those are like good fires. So
yeah, so like, yeah, they're adding to the fire, but at least now they can see, and fierce with grasped arms clashed on their sounding shields, the din of war. So they get real
riled up. Satan's a good speaker, public speaker. So then, they see volcano, and they know that there is ore inside of volcanoes that's made by sulfur.
They just dig it up.
Manon. And then I wrote as my note, I said, Manon is so into ore. He loves that shit.
A mammon. But yeah, he wanted it.
He admires the riches of heaven's pavement, trodden in gold.
Oh, yeah.
So he kind of coveted gold.
Oh, yeah, but, like, even while he was up in heaven, his gaze would look down at the ground all the time, because it's like, that's some fine gold in those bricks. Everybody be doing their heaven stuff, and he just wanted to dig up the ground, so Satan's like, you always wanted to dig up the ground, Mammon, and he's like, yes, please!
Oh my god.
It's like, go dig up that volcano.
Although I also love that, basically it's describing that there's lots of gold in there, and then in 690, he says, let none admire that riches grow in hell.
Yes.
That soil may best deserve the precious bane. So it's basically saying, where else would gold be from except hell? Gold is definitely a tool of the devil.
Oh, yeah, and to say that, like, you might be real hyped for that, but the best place for that to be, and the place it can make the most good, is staying in the ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just dig up hell. Just start going. Start digging up hell.
They do this for a while. Because there are millions of them, it says, by spirits reprobate in an hour, what in an age, with excessive toil and hands innumerable scarce perform. So it's basically saying, like, in an hour, they can do what people take a whole generation to do. So they kind of make smelting-y things. He kind of just describes the way that people would work with metal and ore and such, and they use it to eventually here build a temple.
Yeah.
A gold temple. And it says it's better than
Babylon or any Egypt, Assyria. They're like, nah, this is big and huge.
This one's even better than all of their stuff, and it's great.
Quick side note.
Yeah.
I have no qualms with some pretty common spellings that you have to do to make your poems work, like turning like risen into risen.
Yeah.
Or
trodden into trodden.
Or changing the accent on any ED word.
Gotta
instead
hate
of like
though.
And changing like winged into winged. But 735 and sat as princes whom the supreme king. There's an act. How the fuck am I supposed to read that?
Mine doesn't have it.
Yours doesn't have it? I'm not shocked. There's Suprema. I don't... And there is a note down here. The stress, disliked by Bentley, was quite normal. So this editor is like...
whoever Bentley is, he's giving a good old fuck you.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I am squarely in Bentley's corner on this one. Get that out of here.
Get that shit out of here.
That is disgusting, and I know we're discussing the creation of hell right now, but you don't need to create it in front of my eyes.
The architect of this building, in the poem, it says Mulciber, but I looked it up, and that's Vulcan or Hephaestus, which I know him more commonly as Vulcan, but basically what you're looking at is a Greco-Roman god.
Yeah.
Anyway, it says that, he fell because
Yeah.
Jove threw him in, but no, he fell long before that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So it's basically saying you thought that Zeus threw him out of Olympus, but he actually was thrown out of a more awesome heaven way before.
But that's just a theory.
A Milton theory.
Greek myth confirmed for Bible.
Bible 3 confirmed.
Bible 3 confirmed. Oh no.
This is the worst. Okay, let's
so good.
keep going. So, he's the architect of the building. They say the building's cool.
Yeah.
He built some towers in heaven, and now he's building this hell building.
Yeah.
The good old Hell Central capital.
Yeah, and they call the capital Pandemonium.
Pandemonium, the high capital of Satan and his peers. He tried to get all the highest ranking angels in there. Basically, it says, by place or choice the worthiest. So, the good ones are supposed to come in there and have like a meeting. And they barely fit in there even still. And they're like, not just on the ground, but also in the air. So there's like, they're like, you know when, like, you're packed inside, like, an elevator? But imagine, like, the air in the elevator is also full of flying people. So, it was brushed with the hiss of rustling wings in, 768.
As bees.
As bees! In the springtime! So, yeah, they're just, like, describing how thick these guys are, even if it's just to take up space. And at this point in time, Satan's all like, they all shrink then. Remembering, I guess, that they can take on any form they want, he shrinks them. Or, like, they shrink themselves there. In bigness to surpass Earth's giant suns. And I'm not saying suns like S-U-N, I'm talking about S-O-N. Where are our giant suns? Please someone tell me where Earth's giant suns are. They but now who in bigness to surpass Earth's giant suns, now less than the smallest dwarves in a narrow room.
Okay, give me a second to check that really quickly.
Yeah, please tell me about Earth's giant suns. Footnote Magoo.
All it has to say is that that's another dig at it being satirical, that they're like, it's so big that it's small. And I mean, you know what? Reading over this again, I had forgotten.
It's not so big that it's small. It says, till the signal was given. Well, and then they gave a signal and they all shrunk.
Well, basically, it says that in the epic poem tradition, Milton would have been very familiar with everything being big, which is another reason why he spent so much time talking about how big and glorious and epic, you know, it's an epic poem, everything is, that the whole, that then he goes and he just lushly for several lines talks about how small and how epically tiny everything is. That's another argument for, this is a little tongue-in-cheek, guys. You don't know epic poems talk about how ridiculously tiny things are.
I mean, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, again, I don't know too well either way, but because we are more or less at the end of the first book, I will say that I can understand a little bit of the ideas of there is some humor in this. I'd say that it's kind of a bit of a dark, wry humor, and it's definitely at Satan's expense, but I think that reading that there is a touch of, oh, I'm mad at Dad, isn't a wrong reading, and that would be a little satirical.
Yeah. Okay, so we're pretty much at the end here of book 1. It says that they shrink most of them, but 1,000 of the really awesome seraphic lords and cherubim stayed the same size, like big and cool, and they sat on golden chairs. And then, after a short silence, then summons were read, and the great consult began. The end. they're like, and next chapter is going to be the cool consult that we do in our cool new Golden Palace.
Yeah, because they need a place to, like, sit that isn't fire all the time. Which, you know, gold wouldn't be my first choice, but...
I mean, I actually wouldn't know how comfortable a full golden chair was, because I've literally never sat in a full golden chair.
Well, no, isn't, like, the melting point of gold really, really low? It's a highly malleable metal when pure.
Yeah, but wouldn't that make it more of a comfortable chair?
Well, no, but I'm saying...
Like, maybe your butt melts a little. Just kidding, I know that gold's melting point is higher than that.
No, darling, the ground is fire!
Oh, yeah, I guess what you're saying is that the chairs might melt.
I mean, we're gonna have, like, a little bit of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Palace, sort of.
Well, look, if the gold is melting onto them, then they're just gonna look cool and shiny, like Smaug. So, I guess that probably want to maybe have us do some kind of, like, sections or questions. I liked our little summary so far. Maybe what I'll say is, what was your favorite part of what we read?
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm gonna be moderately basic about this, that just, like, the really cool moments from Satan. Even if, like, what he's doing as far as the world of the book, because we're supposed to take it as read that God was doing things right, but it's hard not to really admire that grit and determination and just flowing Byronic nobility that he has, even in that being laid low like this, at least from a modern sensibility, that does not make you low. Being able to persevere in the face of something like this elevates you and makes you the more noble. And I know that it's one of the most compelling and beloved facets of Paradise Lost, especially after Frankenstein, contributed to the discussion, and I'm a fan of that too. Just that, man, continuing to hear how he won't give up, and the real juicy angst of those moments when he lets it slip through, and just, yeah.
I'm in full agreement on that. Obviously, Satan is the best character. Just to say that I think that his fight with Tears is my favorite moment.
Yeah.
But all of his speeches were great. Even his first one where he just turns to his friend and closest advisor to just go like, "Oh man, we're down here together." Kind of like, you feel that. I think it's hard not to feel for a character with so much resolve, and in these trying times, a nice for a couple of gays to get to see some of that row fight the power spirit. You know?
Oh, I thought that you were gonna say that you shipped Satan and Beelzebub.
Oh well, I'm totally on board for shipping later. I just haven't felt enough. Right now, it seems like Beelzebub is like really. He seems to like really admire Satan and think well of him, but I haven't seen enough like tension between them yet to really feel that good shipping urge. I'm not saying it won't come later. Just saying for right now.
If anybody knows of any weird
cool
classical through Victorian shipping of Beelzebub and Satan, I know that it's out there because teenage girls have existed. And
since time immemorial, teenage
girls
girls have existed. But in all seriousness, thanks for listening. Hopefully we will have another chapter out soon, or rather book, as that's how it goes. We're going to do this in terms of segments of books. It's about 40 pages for me to read, and then about 100 for my wife to read. But we'll get there, and hopefully see you soon. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know if there's anything you want to hear more of or less of.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
All right. See you next time.
And don't let hell get you down.
Oh, okay. I love "Don't Let Hell Get You Down" as an outro.
Actually, if we're gonna do an outro, I really want to go with in the next week, I hope that you gain some reinforcement from hope, and if not, you can get some good steady resolution from despair.
Resolution from despair, my friends.